Peace of Christ be with you. This morning we have a very special chapel, and to introduce our guest is our beloved president, Dr. John Knapp.
All right. It is a very special privilege for me today to introduce my friend Russel Botman to my friends at Hope College. Dr. Botman is president of Stellenbosch University, one of the finest academic institutions in the Southern Hemisphere in South Africa. And Dr. Botman is here for the Presidential Colloquium. You'll have opportunities to hear him on several occasions. I encourage you to take note of the dates that are on the screen behind you today and tomorrow, those times where you'll have a chance to hear him share some of his vision, not only for South Africa and the change that he's leading there, but also for higher education. Dr. Botman is a theologian in the Reformed tradition and a pastor. He was a leading voice in opposition to apartheid, speaking with a strong theological voice from a Christian perspective about the injustices of a system that oppressed people based on race. He today is the first black president of a historically white institution, Stellenbosch, and is leading a project that you'll have an opportunity to hear about tomorrow at 4 o'clock or today at 4 o'clock, actually, in Winant's auditorium, where he will talk with us about a project that is designed to mobilize that university and its resources and its expertise for the good of South African society as an agent of positive change. And that project, you'll be happy to know, is called the Hope Project. And so it's with great pleasure that I welcome Dr. Botman to speak to us this morning. I also want to extend a welcome to his wife, Beryl, who's with us today. And just make sure that you give him a warm welcome, because he has come from the Southern Hemisphere where it was 95 degrees when he left home. So, ladies and gentlemen, Russel Botman.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here and to share a thought or two with you. It's about a very peculiar story in the book of Corinth, which is 1 Corinth 7, about a letter that was sent to Paul. And the letter made a number of assumptions, and based on those assumptions, asked a number of questions about marriage. And Paul opened the letter, and then he realized that the letter was signed only by male folk. And he thought, now, why wouldn't the women also sign this letter and ask their questions? But then he realized it doesn't work like that in that culture. And then he started thinking carefully, and he says, I thought carefully about your questions, I thought carefully, and I wondered what to say and how to respond. I would like to say a few things. Now, the reason that these men who trust Paul, who was not married, to say something about marriage is in itself interesting, but it's based on the idea that they thought that Paul understood the culture very well. Paul was a person whom you could ask, how should a woman behave in the temple? And Paul would have an answer. How should a woman be dressed in an assembly of worship? Then Paul would have an answer. And so they thought they could ask him these questions on marriage based on their assumptions of what marriage should be and what is the status quo of marriage in their time. And they thought that Paul, as this great custodian of the culture, although he is this great preacher of the Word of God, would be able to answer them in such a way that they can go back to their wives and tell them, look here, Paul said, this is the way you behave in my house. And then Paul gave them a very tough answer. Paul said, and knowing that they were all men who signed, he said, but this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. And Paul created one of, I think, the greatest short circuits in the minds of most men of that time. How can he say that? But it is in this word, as if you had none, that is the important part of this story. It is that as if you don't possess the other. As if you don't possess. As if you don't possess. I want to tell you how he gets to that. He says, the time is short, and we have to begin to think differently. And he makes this very important last sentence. He says, and those who use this world as if they are not misusing it. For the form of this world is passing away. For the way things happen, look at them, study them, understand the status quo, understand the scheme of things. Know that you actually would want to have your wife fit into the scheme of things, fit into the status quo, fit into the culture. It may just not happen that way, because actually the culture is passing by. Actually the form of things are passing by. Actually the very status quo is passing by. And he says, brethren, time is short. These questions are important questions. We understand it. It's in your heart. You want to solve it now because you want to know what right you have over that woman that you have married. But the reality is that maybe you must begin to ask yourself questions about the status quo, the way those assumptions were formed, where those assumptions come from, and why you continue to regard them as so important. And perhaps it has to do with your relationship with the status quo. So he then goes on to say, I don't want to shock you about marriage. I want to tell you actually what the heart of the story is. And he goes on, he says, the time is short. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. Then it comes to this word possess. And it is this very important thing, is when you buy something that is very important to you, close to you, not to feel that you actually possess that thing, as you might have felt in some other relationship that you possess somebody, as you possess something. And then to begin to challenge these very important men who believe that you would give them the good answer, to challenge them by saying, I want to bring you a culture-transforming message. I want to bring you a world-transforming message. I want to bring you a status quo-transforming message. And it is simple. I must tell you now because the time is short. I can't waste your time. I can't waste my time anymore by trying to explain how we can compromise all of the time. And then he makes these very important but also very shocking statements. The form of the world is passing by. Now, the meaning of the idea of the form of the world is passing by comes from the idea that the scheme of things, the way things were put together, the assumptions that were driving the way they were made, the values that were driving the way they were put where they are, those things are passing by. And as they pass by, not only the form, but the world will change. And the context will change. Your life will change. The relationships that you find yourselves in will change. Now, when I say that, and the big challenge is then to ask now, how should a person live who live in such a world that has its form passing away? Now, the way to do that is to live as if it were not. To live as if what this reality shows you are as the only way to be, the only way to live, the status quo that says you must just insert yourself and you'll be happy forever. These assumptions, to begin to ask questions about them, to live as if they were not. Now, if you say that you live as if they were not, then there is another challenge, and that is to live as if what is then? And this is now what I want to share with you. You know, Jesus Christ challenged us to say a prayer, a very difficult prayer. And we learn that from very early ages, and it simply says, "Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Now, it does not say more or less as it is in heaven. It does not say, let your will compromise with the way it is on earth. It simply says, let your heavenly will become the earthly will. Let the way you want things in heaven be the way you get things on earth. And help me get it. Help me understand what it means. Help me say these words so that my world, my part of the earth, will be part of that doing of your will. Now, when you ask Jesus and you make that prayer, what you're actually saying is, God, I want you to be part of my history. I want you to be part of a history that changes, a history that does not stay static, a history that becomes renewed every time. I pray not for the reality that I see. I pray for the reality that I see in your hand. I pray for the reality that I see that is possible in your eyes, beyond the status quo. And then you remember the words of Jesus Christ. He said, look, I make all things new. And this renewing work of God in our world, in our lives, in our different places on earth is an important part. And it calls us to live as if it is that will of God, that which is coming to us from the future, that which God has prepared for us in future, that is coming to us because it belongs to us now, that will of God, that we live for it, that we live not simply as if the context that we see, the world as we see it, is the only way to be on earth. But he says, let those who weep be as though they did not weep, and those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. It is as if he's saying, look here, the world falls out in two pieces, those who rejoice and those who weep. And it's not a question of the one that must just step back and begin to see the future. It's both that must step back and see the future. Both those who rejoice and those who weep must stop, step back, see a future that is coming, that is a changing the way things are. God bless you.